We could have done a rugby version of the Gillette Labs performance rankings, and I think you probably would have had Leinster, Connacht and Ulster in the green, but there would have been red held exclusively for the Irish women's team and Munster over the weekend, Alan. We can start with the bad rather, and we can finish with the good. Will we start with Munster?
It's your call now.
That first half performance by Munster was so disappointing because there'd been such great signs of an uptick in form, of bodies coming back, of a real sense of, okay, we know exactly what we need to do. Our destiny for the rest of the season is in our own hands. Let's go and start winning games, particularly against the opponents that they were facing. And they did not show up.
They didn't, and it was a real kind of eye-opener for that group of players. I think their attitude wasn't right either. I think, players will come out maybe and say, yes, it was, and we were focused and we trained well all week and stuff like that. But if you're off a little bit of a couple of percent each player, and maybe there seemed to be a lot of looking around and for waiting for other players to do it, I wouldn't over panic. I think the reality is that if they come up against a very, very strong, powerful team, that they are short in certain areas, probably most notably in the front row, the depth chart. Look at what Leinster were able to put out Friday night in Michael Milne, John McKee, Ala Lato, and the level of performance with all the props in front rows they're missing. So there's a depth issue there.
But Kilcoyne started and got taken off at half time.
Yeah, it was poor.
Back from the Ireland squad.
He was, and I thought that he did really well for Ireland during the Six Nations. Looked to have a bit of strength and power, and he really good carries back. For some reason, maybe, I don't know, he didn't really have a good first half at all. He was up against Sander Fagerson, who's a really experienced, strong scrummager. So first thing, Glasgow really good. Picked a lot of strong players. Looked at this game and said, we win this game, we most probably have a home quarter final. So they front loaded the team. Very good coaching set up there, and they looked like a real team right across the board the other night. Munster lost all the collisions. They were falling off tackles. They were slow and pedestrian. And unlike them, to be fair, Joe, we've given them a lot of credit here in the last 3 months, and rightly so. Since that South African game, they'd played 13 and won 10, lost 3, 2 to Toulouse and 1 to Leinster. There's no shame in that. This is the one, and it was a run of 3 games between Osprey Scarlets and Glasgow. And I was kind of saying it back in January, stating the obvious. You win those 3 games, go to Benetton, win away in the end of January, and win the 3 home games, and you turn your whole season around. From a league point of view, they would have been looking at top 4. Now they've a mountain to climb going to South Africa, and but like I said, learning curve. They've got to look at that and say, where were they wrong in the first half? And if they analyse it, they were really sloppy, poor. Set piece was bad, very porous defensively, and this isn't just like the last game against the Scarlets. They conceded 6 tries in that game. They conceded 5, so that's 11 tries in 2 games. I saw someone tweeting the other day, it's record points conceded by a team since 2001-2002 season at home. So, and up to that point, their defence was really good all season. They were up near the top 2 or 3 with points conceded, but not good. Not a good night for him.
Like just for anybody who didn't see the team, the pack was Kilcoyne, Barron, Salanoa started, John Klein and Finning Wycherley, Jack O'Donoghue, who captained the team, John Hodnett and Gavin Coombs. Like, Hodnett and Coombs were supposed to be in Ireland,
And both of those guys played pretty well. John Hodnett was outstanding around the field as regards his work rate, his energy, the tackles he was making.
Even in the first half?
Yeah, he was still flying around the place. Coombs, probably not. He came and played better in the second half. But there's out of the rest of them, you're surprisingly, they all seem lacklustre. And second best to the physical stakes, and Glasgow were really up for this game. There was a little bit of bite to it, and as I said, they really targeted this. So mentally a real learning curve for them, but they are short with depth. It's not I'm not saying Dermot Byrne, Dave Kilcoyne, Rome Salanoa are replace the 3 of them with 3 others and it'll be all fine. I think they need more depth, and it's kind of when you come up against a side that have a very strong like Fraser Brown was playing, Xander Fagerson. They're in the Scottish squad. They're strong internationals, and they cause a lot of problems for Munster. So very good Glasgow side, to be fair, but you can't concede the tries they did the other night and expect to be happy with yourself. It's 28-0 at half time. They were very, very poor, and they know that themselves.
Okay, what fixes this now? Because
what fixes this now? I think first of all they've got to make sure that their attitude is right, and that they learn and understand that when you're on a good run, it can turn very, very quickly with a sloppy performance, not being on it mentally, getting the emotion right. They should have been fresh going into the game. They hadn't played in a couple of weeks. From what I'm hearing, the training is good. They're all seem very happy. And they've shown a lot of improvements, to be fair. We can't just kind of, like, it doesn't surprise me, because I still think the reality of the depth and...
Should they not have picked a stronger team for that? Should Snyman have started, or like?
No, I don't think so. Look, the reality for RG Snyman, and lots of people are asking me, why isn't he starting? The guy hasn't played in 18 months.
So they're
the way they're
in.
playing now, Ger, with the fitness and the movement and the pace to their game, it requires a level of conditioning that's very, very high, and he is still has a bit of time to go there. And you know, you can't just put him out in the field and say he's going to play superb. It takes a long time. I've been there myself with the 6-month injuries. It takes a long time. So having him off the bench in the next couple of weeks will be really important. Maybe he'll start, but he needs more time. He needs more training. He needs more conditioning. So he's not going to come in and fix it. Peter O'Mahony, Conor Murray, Ty Byrne not being there. But like... They're not missing too many. That's probably the worry.
Yeah. Is this a bit of a wake-up call then for...
It should be. Yeah, it should be. So they've given themselves a mountain now to climb, going to the Sharks and the Stormers and the Sharks in a couple of weeks. And from a league point of view, I know they go there next week in the Champions Cup. But
you've any hope for those two games, Sharks and Stormers?
It's hard to know. It depends what kind of team. Sharks were poor against Scarlets at the weekend. All the South Africans are at home in round 17 and 18. So it's
mountain to climb in some ways
for a lot of teams, and you know it's really difficult. They've made it really difficult for themselves. But that's sport. They were poor at the weekend, and they showed a lot better in the second half. But you can't start a game like that, and I'm sure when they review, they'll see lots of people falling off tackles, a little bit lazy in defence. They've got much fitter, and their attack has been superb this season. So there's a lot of positives around the way they've played. But I think what we saw at the weekend was the possible reality now in the next few weeks of that depth, the quality that you need throughout a squad.
This is squeaky bum time for the important part of the season, and everybody's going to have their full teams out.
Correct.
And so this is the reality of where Munster are. If they can somehow pull out a performance next weekend in the European Cup, that's a massive shot in the arm.
From an attack point of view, what we've seen the last few months, they've been really brilliant, and they've showed that against Toulouse in the Champions Cup and Northampton. Tough games against very strong teams, but somehow or another, I think mentally they were off it the other night. That's not to say they would have won the game, but if you concede 28 points at home, it's impossible. If they're, even the mistakes they made when they were 21-0 up, Glasgow, Munster were putting pressure on their line. Get a try or two there, get in 21-7. It's a different story then, but it's just too much.
Here's a question: if the two teams so Leinster obviously named a very depleted team compared to what their first choice team is going to be. If that Leinster team had come up against that Munster team, you would have said Leinster would be slight favourites. If say that game was in Thomond in the league, it's hard to know exactly when you see the two teams. But what Leinster were able to do when the game was going against them was have the nous and the game smarts to stop it getting out of hand.
Correct.
And then they got back into it, and that's the bit that you'd be concerned about.
Well, they're proving that they have an ability to do that, and that they have the players to do that. There's players in that Leinster team on Friday night who could potentially be challenging for international places if they were somewhere else. It's probably coming against them because there's so much depth there. So many good players and a lot of young players and obviously it's the level of cohesiveness they're at they're further down the road as regards their development and their the kind of structure in and the level they're at, the standard that they're at training wise, all that kind of stuff. You've heard Dennis Leamy and Mike Prendergast speak about, you know, changing the way they play and the pace and the tempo. These Leinster players are doing this for years, so that was an incredible game Friday night, wasn't it? The reaction, the pace. Luke McGrath, just sometimes I wonder why he's out of the Irish squad. He's superb, you know, fantastic. Rhys Ruddock, Penny, Max Deegan, these players. John McKee, the hooker, he's third choice essentially behind the other two internationals. So just quality players right across the board, and the pace and tempo to that was phenomenal. It was a great game.
Okay, so we just need to rein our expectations in about how quickly this
a little bit, and I wouldn't go overboard as regards. It wasn't good enough the other night. That's the reality. I think they're better than that, but they're not a team, and we've said it for a long time, that are winning European Cup or the URC. I think for them, being in the Europe next year and getting into the playoffs is a bonus, and they need to get better. They need to recruit more. They need to get some more players in, and most notably in that front row, it's to get more depth and quality there, you know. And the more internationals you have in your team, the stronger you are right across the board. But I think the performance of the weekend was Connacht. They have won their last 5. 4 of those have been bonus point wins. Out of nowhere now, they're suddenly looking like they're in a playoff spot, and they're in Europe next year. If they win, their next game is at home to Cardiff. You think they'll win that with 5 points? That'll put them to 49. And then they're away against Glasgow in the last game. Glasgow may already have secured their 4th spot, which I think they will.
So they could be resting players.
Yeah, so Connacht, it's in Connacht's hands now, and I think it's a remarkable turnaround. You know, if you end up winning 7, they've won 5 now. If they end up winning 7 games in a row, well, you just got to tip your hat to them. And I think the difference between Munster and Connacht on Saturday was, obviously Edinburgh are not going as good as Glasgow this year. That's a fact.
Yeah.
But that was a very strong Edinburgh team. A lot of internationals there, a lot of quality players, and Connacht just blew them away with pace, tempo, the attacking ability. Caelan Blade was outstanding. He scored 3 tries. Cathal Ford in the centre, what a find he's been. Shane Jennings came on there, looks like a great player as well. And if they get in the front foot Connacht like that, in good conditions, I think, and they were brilliant at the weekend.
And from an Ulster perspective, Quinny, I mean, Tom Stewart, I guess, is the man. I think it's 15 tries in 20 Ulster games, hat-trick, 7 in the last 3, which is remarkable.
A lot of them are from Mauls now, given
of course.
One of their big strengths this year.
Look, obviously you have Sheehan, you have Herring, you have Kelleher as well, but what does the next year or two look like for Tom Stewart?
Well, it's I'm a big fan of his. I think he's a really good player. He's abrasive, his skill set, his ability to carry around the field. He really has something about him. He's a quality player, and he's a great find for Ulster. He hasn't just kind of come out of nowhere. He's been in their system for a while. He was a very good schools player, underage player as well. I think he's a top quality player who's going to start pushing the ones above. The unfortunate thing, you think, for any hookers in this country is Dan Sheehan and Ronan Kelleher. You know, they're probably going to be around for a lot. I know Ronan Kelleher, unfortunately, have had a couple of injuries, but Tom Stewart is a great player. I think
basically need 4 full-time hookers who would be able to fit in seamlessly, and with Kelleher's injury profile and Herring's age profile, you can see Stewart getting plenty of game time for Ireland certainly over the next World Cup cycle. And I was saying earlier, it wouldn't be shocking to see him involved in the World Cup squad. We do have to talk about the women's rugby team and their collapse against Wales. It's a massive letdown. It's all the air coming out of the balloon straight off, and it's very difficult to see how they can turn that around to try and finish anywhere other than it's a battle for 5th or 6th in the Six Nations. What happened?
They were overpowered, outskilled, and out-muscled by a Welsh side that are obviously ahead of them. It's amazing when you read stuff online, you read reports, and there's some people very critical. Some people are blaming the IRFU, some people are blaming the girls themselves. You have to really, for Greg McWilliams picking his squad, he's either picking the right players or he's picking the wrong players. That's the first thing. So he's got to back and believe what he's doing himself. I don't think there's any sort of decisions being made by him, cynical decisions of excluding players who spoke against the RFU. That's been mentioned a lot. I think he's trying to pick a team that he can build something for the future. There's a lot of young, inexperienced players here. The level they're playing at is still a problem. That isn't just going to have fixed itself, Ger, in one fell swoop. I think what's happened with contracted players and all that kind of stuff, that's going to take time. It's power development. And if you look at the game, go back and look at the game at the weekend, the tries they scored were all power, strength. Like there's 2 maul tries, there's 2 pick and goes tries. There's another try from the centre just going straight through that defensive line off a scrum, that back line. And the pace and the skill set of that, it was kind of frightening. So it was alarming to see the power and the pace and the skill set. All 23 of those girls are playing in the English Premiership, and it showed the gulf. Could Ireland have been better? Should they have been better? Yes. But I think it wasn't just down to power. Their skill set, their development, all that kind of stuff is further ahead. At
a structural level, though, it would be great if the RFU were able to come out and explain exactly how they're going to bridge the gap and what the plan is and what the time frame for that is. It feels a little bit like the contracts were reactionary, and it feels a little bit like the IRFU have constantly been on the back foot ever since there was a letter published to shame them into doing something.
Yeah.
They weren't out in front of that in advance, and like their relationship with the women's game seems kind of a little bit like the old FAI relationship with the League of Ireland. It's like, we should do something. How are we supposed to fix this? Oh, let's get some people in. And I don't think they don't appear to be as behind it as they are the men's game. They haven't looked at the structures and gone, okay, is there just something, can we just rip this idea off from here and put this on here? It doesn't feel like they're as enthusiastic about it as they should be.
Yeah, if you look at the report, a lot of changes have happened as a result of the report. I think if you go back probably a number of years, that's where the problems. They've reacted to the report. Okay, they've reacted to the pressure, and I think they've done a lot of positive things have started to happen. Like, I've listened to girls and women's rugby in the last 12 to 18 months saying how brilliant things are, how it's great to get the contracts, it's great to get the new changes, the support networks, the team manager, the connection between the RFU and the women's team. But
they are all employees, you know.
Yeah, but even some people on the outside who are not. Of course, there's people very critical and still going back blaming the RFU. So we can stay blaming the RFU or
we've got to hold it to account, I think.
Oh no, for sure. But it is what it is at the moment. You have a bunch of very inexperienced girls who are finding their feet, and that's going to take time. That's the other side of the coin. There's 8 of these players who were involved last year against Wales. There's so many new players in there. There's a lot of young players. Sive McGrath was making her debut at 18 and in the front row. You know what I mean? There's a number of players playing their first Six Nations game.
Yeah.
So very relatively inexperienced. So maybe Greg McWilliams has the answers. Maybe I don't know as regards. I think some of the implementation of what the ladies wanted out of the report and what came out of the report, they're going to take time, Ger, to get a return on that. And the reality, you have to deal in reality here. The other teams are further down the field.
Yeah, I totally accept the other teams are further down the field, and that if you were planning this whole thing, you wouldn't start from where you are now. But it still doesn't feel to me like the IRFU are on top of the issues, and it still doesn't feel to me like so.
So what are the issues?
Well, the pathway from the club game to the interprovincial game, problem. The fact that we haven't really invested that enough in the contracts to even convince some of the players to come back from England. Maybe we should actually outsource for a couple of years. We should outsource some players.
So what's
to England.
happened is development officers have been put into all the provinces now to try and recruit more girls to upskill them, but that is at the very lower base level. So that stuff should have been happening years ago, and then you might have more players to choose from. They're playing at a higher level, and the simple maths of this is if you're a coach and you've a bigger group of players, a bigger pool to pick from, and they're playing at a higher level, it's easier. There's a number of these girls Irish girls over playing in the Premiership as well. If you had all of them over there playing week in, week out, would they be better, do you think?
Instinctively you'd say in the short term, obviously that's not your long term solution, but maybe the right thing to do is to allow half of them or help more of them to get over to England to play.
I would think it'd be better, wouldn't
in the short term. And obviously at the same time you're trying to build up the provinces. So I don't know the chapter and verse of it, but I do follow some people who are constantly saying that the committee approach to it has been largely led by people who were responsible for the issues in the first place, and that they're not actually addressing the long term issues. So that's, you know,
I know, and look, these things have to be debated, and on the evidence of what we saw at the weekend, it was poor, it was worrying, it was. They've got France at home next, which doesn't get any easier. But I think that Welsh team, I was in the RDS last year when Wales beat Ireland 29-17, and the gap wasn't.
Yeah.
You know, you could see that it was a bit of strength and power. Tupolota, she scored a try at the weekend. She's a cousin of the Vunipolos, and they've obviously rugby blood, and she's very powerful. But she played last year. But that game last year in the RDS, it came down to a little bit of power. At the weekend, it was a lot of power.
Yeah.
It was a lot of the skills, the pace. And in fairness, I think they reacted in the second half. It does happen. It was like Munster coming back when they're 28-0 down. The girls came back. They sorted their scrum out.
Okay, we got to go.
They have problems, and
unfortunately, we have
worrying.
5 or 6 weeks of this to look forward to talk more about it. Alan, good stuff. Thanks a million. On tomorrow.